Welcome to Executive Access, created for motivated professionals. This is your home for real talk with executives about their career journeys, leadership practices, successes, and learnings along the way. I am your host, Jamie Tazi. Today, we'll hear from President of Google North America, Michael Clark. Michael has a very impressive track record in the tech industry, including previous to Google, leading at Microsoft for 20 years, all matters go to market. Michael is a phenomenal, intentional communicator, and I asked him to break that down for us, explain how he communicates so effectively in so many different scenarios. Michael's also well known for building strong teams and growing people in their careers. I asked him to share how he does this, and today he shares both his high-level guiding principles as well as very specific frameworks that you can immediately put into practice to help you with your leadership journey. He challenges us to think about what we want to be known for, staying curious, and empowering your team. Michael is one of the most principled, kind, and dare I say fun leaders that I ever had the privilege of working with. Let's dive in. Welcome, Michael Clark, to Executive Access. I'm so excited that you're here. You are the president of Google North America, and you have a ton of experience in the tech industry, longstanding executive with roles at Microsoft and otherwise. So we're very excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Well, first off, I'm excited to be here, Jamie. It's great to get reconnected.
Excellent. I should have said in your intro, your experiences around all go-to-market, sales, marketing, partner, technology, sort of all of it, right? So I guess I have a ton of questions for you today, but I wanted to start with the old growth mindset question, my favorite topic. Tell us a few things that you're working on to professionally or personally grow these days.
You know, it's funny, and this will be the same things that probably I talked to you about, 10 years ago when we were working more closely together. But, I think it starts with, every day, taking that deep breath, having an expression of gratitude, putting my feet firmly on the floor and stating my intention for the day. I think that gets us, started off in the right place. And then, I'm a voracious sort of learner, as the best way I describe it. Today was sort of my busy schedule. Oftentimes it'll be like listening to podcasts, either when I'm cycling or taking my dog for a walk. But I have like this Google Doc where the title of it is Reflections. And the headline is where I say, capturing and being more purposeful about insights, learnings, or investments that are helping me get balanced growth and fulfillment. So like, as I'm out walking my dog this morning, thinking about what I listened to and what's that one nugget that I'll write down sort of as a memory point. Because I think, if we can learn something every day or take something away from sort of every conversation, that sort of fills my bucket. So that's what feeds me from a growth perspective.
I love that. I started a gratitude practice, I guess maybe a year and a half ago. And I had heard that somewhere, start your day with gratitudes. And so I just started doing it. And it makes a world of difference, right? It just gets you in the right mindset, and you realize sometimes there's stress and anxiety, but like there's so much more to be grateful for. And I love the intentionality of your practice. Well, I look forward to hearing about some of your reflections today. So let's start with, I can't not ask you about just the crazy pace of change with technology in the industry. And even when you and I worked together several years ago, things have just advanced so much. So I'm curious about what are the challenges facing your team right now, and how are you coaching your team around just this crazy pace of change?
It's funny. I think things have changed a ton, but some things remain universally the same. And so like the number one thing that I think about is like, I think our purpose as a sales organization is like, we wake up every single day focused on aligning our capabilities to the outcomes that matter most for our customers. And if you sort of unpack that statement, what we're really looking for from folks is like to really deeply understand the things that are most important for your customers. Like you need to be a student of your customer's business. You need to have like intense overall curiosity for you to be able to translate our capabilities against those outcomes. Like you need to have a lot of like intellectual horsepower to really think through sort of what's my point of view and what's my perspective. Because, I think what we know is getting into the executive office isn't the hard part. The hard part is actually being sticky and relevant when you're in that executive office. And so for me, I really sort of am thinking through every day, like, how do we just show up in a much more relevant and impactful way for our customers and really demonstrate our understanding of their business and how best we might be able to help against the things that we know is most important.
I love that. I mean, these are skills. I was reflecting on the fact that customers have everything that they need in terms of research at the power of their fingertips, right? So when they meet with us, they're incredibly well informed. And so what I'm hearing you say is the differentiator is curiosity. How am I learning about that customer's business? And I don't know, I feel like people can tell when you're curious or not, or whether it's rote. And then being able to come up with a point of view. Can you say more about the point of view? Because I didn't always see that when I was in, sales.
Yeah, look, I think part of it is, so a couple things. One is, the question that everybody should ask themselves is, when's the last time that I felt really heard? Like, there's a big difference between listening and being heard. And so this notion of like, when you're a real student of your customer's business, or when you've done a great job of listening to your customer, what they're trying to solve, and you play it back for them, like, that just knows that not only was I listening to you, like I was actively like not speaking, both of my ears were on, but I'm actually articulating back sort of what I heard from you. Like, that's a really powerful thing to get on the same side of the table, where the customer says, this is someone that is genuinely trying to help. And then I think on a point of view perspective is, I think one of the big moments for me was, I had left, Microsoft after sort of a 20-year career. And I remember showing up, my first day at Google Cloud was at our next conference. I remember listening to the things that we were talking to customers about. And I remember, like, at the time sort of saying, no wonder our customers might be confused, because in some ways it was that idea of, at the time, that the things that everybody was talking about in the industry had about 90% overlap. And so we're like, you really have to get to that sweet spot of, what is that set of differentiated capabilities that I have that we know are important to our customers, that I can point to where we've helped similar customers in similar situations and the impact that it's driven on the business. So that point of view is sort of really like that. It's much more than talking about Gen AI or sort of our capabilities on Gen AI, but what has Gen AI meant for the overall customer experience? What has it meant for, I think about Verizon, which is a big customer of ours. For us, it's this idea of like, being able to contain more calls, maintain NPS, and drive huge savings in their call center, like coming with a point of view that is super relevant for their business and multidimensional. That's sort of what I'm talking about, Jamie.
Oh, that's great. And I feel like that requires kind of an evolving skill set, certainly than when I started 25 years ago, where it was just about kind of bringing information. It's understanding, I would think, your solutions very, very well, but understanding your customer and being able to bridge the context between.
Yeah, that's actually a better way to articulate it. I like the way you said it, which is depth of understanding of what your customer is trying to achieve, depth of understanding of your solutions, and then the translation between the two. And I think that is a unique and highly differentiated skill. So that's something that we really look for and we really coach for. And because that's when the magic happens. And when I think about, or I talk to our customers about, when we have a breakthrough success with a customer, I said, help me understand why we won. Like, tell me what it was, what was the reason that you chose us? And 9 times out of 10, it has to do with, like, the things that I hear is it's, they're complimenting the team, how well they understood their business, how committed they were to the causes and the goals that they had, and how they were able to bring the best of the company's sort of capabilities to help them down this road where they knew they were on leading edge, but they also knew they were doing it in a risk mitigated way. It was sort of that nice sort of balance between the two.
Nice. So, I think it's really impactful that you're leaning in with your team and leading in this way. I was preparing for a keynote presentation that I did last year and looking up all these statistics, and the recurring statistics, I think it was from Gartner, when they interviewed a bunch of buyers in enterprise technology. They said that 60% of them would stop working with a sales rep if they didn't try to understand their business. And then like 75% of them said most sales reps don't understand my business. And so I kind of like that, because I can differentiate myself very, very easily from the pack out there by just doing the things that you're talking about. So,
Hey, Jamie, I'm going to brag on you a little bit because you may not remember this, or that there was a point in time that we were working together, and the level of prep that you put into sort of customer meetings, the way you sort of studied their business, and the way you brought that into sort of overall customer conversations, like you were consciously like amazingly competent on that. And I said, Jamie, you really got to decode this for others, because this is a methodology that's going to be so impactful for folks. I don't think you realize how you do this and how impactful it is in the moment. I'm not sure if you remember that time and place when we were working together. So,
I do. You wanted me to tell like 300 sales reps why, like, show them how I prepare for a meeting. And I think I said to you, no, I'm not going to do that. I want to talk about something strategic. Isn't this so obvious? And you said, I think you have an unconscious competency. But that is, I like simple things. You have to walk into every meeting creating value. And if you don't know a little bit or show that you've done your work. And it's just fun, right? So thank you for remembering that. Yes. And by the way, that presentation was a big hit. So you were right, as usual. And I still do that type of presentation today for my clients, and it's still a huge hit, and it's still something that should be so obvious, but is not universally practiced. So,
absolutely.
Well, that is a good transition. I see you. So I didn't say earlier, but we worked together for kind of in the periphery of each other for a lot of your 20 years at Microsoft. But then I worked on your team for a while, and those couple of years were some of the best in my career. We had so much fun. We were going through a lot of change, which could have been challenging at that time, but you were sort of this cool, calm ship captain that guided us through. I always saw you, and still do, as a phenomenal communicator. I think that you bring intentionality to whether you're talking to one person, small groups, or thousands of people in some type of big seminar. And I would just love to peel back that a little bit. Have you talk a little bit about why that's important and maybe your method for doing that?
Yeah, totally. So a couple of things. And so with anything, sometimes we, have influences of, people that we admire. We have things that we've read and learned. And so a couple things is, one, I read a book a long time ago called Made to Stick, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember what the author is, but the notion of Made to Stick was this idea of how to make your communications that much more compelling. And I remember sort of one part of the book that really stuck with me, which is this idea of the curse of knowledge. And sometimes, like, you can know so much about a set of material that you get lost in that material. And I think we can all relate to a colleague, or maybe even ourselves, when we've been in a meeting where we have so much information, and sometimes it's like, not seeing the forest through the trees, because we're so sort of in the moment of the knowledge itself. And so, that really sort of stuck with me. And then there was this a training that I remember taking a long time ago called it was the Power of Optimism. And it was one of those ones where we had someone come and talk and sort of said, think about removing all negative references from your language. And so it's sort of this idea of, we won't make our number too. We'll make our number when, and just the impact it would have on folks. But as I think about sort of reading those two things, what it really got me to was, you need frameworks for communication. Like, if I'm not going to suffer from the curse of knowledge, I need to have frameworks. And so I'll give you an example to make it real. Is think about like the toughest executive meeting that you've ever prepared for. And you're running a big business that's 12 by 12. There are 1,000 things that you could be asked about. It could come in any single direction and things like that. And so we've all had to prepare for sort of those moments. And over time, I've developed a framework that I think helps me better navigate those moments. And so as I'm preparing for those meetings, I sort of have 3 categories of things that I think about. The first category is facts. Like, executives are going to want to know that you know your business. So we're like, what are key facts about my overall business? And I kind of write down maybe the top 3 to 5, or at most sort of 10 facts in bullets, just as a reference point. The next category for me is insights. And one of the things that we all have to remember is that we get this amazing opportunity to spend the vast majority of time with our customers. And so really at the end of the day, like when you're talking to an executive, more than likely, they haven't had the opportunity to spend that amount of time. So how are you looking left to right, and what are the insights and patterns that you would really share that can sort of distill everything that you've learned and make it real through sort of what you heard from company X or what you heard from company Y. So facts, insights, and then the last one I think is as important is leadership tone. And the way that I think about leadership tone is when that discussion is done, and when you're no longer in the room and that senior executive has a debrief with the other executives in the room, what feeling do you want him, what do you want to emote? How do you want him to feel? And what do you want him to say? Do you want him to, is it about like, boy, that team is really getting after it? Or that team is so committed to the success of our customers. So like, what's that leadership tone that you want to convey? Because oftentimes in the tension of the moment, we can think about all the things that are broken, but we really have to think about what are the things we can control? What are the actions we're taking? What's the tone that I'm setting for my organization and for myself? So that's an example of a framework that I've used at every single executive meeting, no matter what the stakes: facts, insights, leadership, tone. The other one is, because it may depend, there have been times in my career where I'm asked to do a lot of press interviews. And, in this day and age, press interviews can be stressful because you don't want to be the person that says something really dumb. And then it's, amplified through all different social channels and things like that. And so I remember when I first got ready for press interviews, I get like this 50-page document. And I'd be like, holy smokes, how am I ever going to prepare for this? And as I started going through it, it's sort of the framework I came up with is, whatever the topic is, like, what is it? Like, what's the topic that we're talking about? Why is it important? And what are examples that bring it to life? And so whenever you have a boatload of information that you're trying to convey to folks, I think if you can distill it down to three things or three categories and really land those with high impact and make them more memorable, that's the thing that I think makes us more effective communicators on that side. And so that's a little bit of, there is some intentionality and there is some framework. And so I actually think it's one of those ones where this is something that I've had to be conscious about, and I've had to develop frameworks, and it's helped me refine my communication over time.
I think what you're talking about is gold, because I think so many of us look at great communicators and it seems to come across just like effortlessly. And what you're describing is a process that you go through to get to that, which is amazing. The curse of knowledge, I often say that expertise is a great gift, but it can also be a bothersome liability because we forget that those we're communicating to probably are not as expert as we are. And so how do you say it really simply, with impact? And then the stories you tell, which I think goes to that leadership tone, right? Or, the bucket of examples that bring it to life. And implied in that as I listen is fundamentally thinking about your audience and others, right? Because you can't have the right leadership tone, or you can't say what is it, or if you're not thinking about like who's on the other side of that, right? So, because what's interesting is we don't want people to be so practiced that they're coming across like a robot, which you don't do. You're kind of, you've got the messaging, but you also come across super relatable and you can pivot, right? I mean, how are you able to mix both
it's
of
funny.
those things?
I've actually had to work really hard on that. And there's, and I'm embarrassed to say, but I'll sort of just say it, like, I remember there was a time and a place where if I was to ask to deliver sort of a half an hour sort of presentation, like, I used to reverse engineer it and say, like, for every minute that I'm going to be presenting, it's probably an hour of prep. And there was a time and a place where like I would completely write out the whole 30-minute thing. I would actually memorize my script. And then I remember getting some feedback that people were like, that it was almost too good and too robotic, meaning that it was so smooth and so whatever that it lost a little bit of its relatability. And so, as over the years, what I've now evolved that to is, and I actually do significantly less prep, but part of it is you really need to have a command of the materials that you're presenting. And so a lot of times what I'll try to do is I'll do a couple of bullets, and I'll just have a couple of words that are bolded in those that allow me to reground on it. So there is this notion of like, for you to be highly authentic, don't be scripted. And the most important thing is you can memorize all the words, but if you don't understand the substance behind the words, you're not going to come off authentic. So spending your prep time really understanding your material, and then leveraging that as a time to then sort of distill out, like, if I could only write down 3 bullets that just had a couple of keywords that would really allow me to sort of land this topic with impact. And so I think that's been an evolution for me. I've actually enjoyed it, meaning now it's some ways the benefit of it is it's significantly less prep and it's significantly less stress. And I think it's enabled me to come off in a much more authentic way.
Oh, I wish you could see my notes right here next to me, because that's exactly what I do. I have like words. It's kind of like, we all know our best stories, the authentic stories that are really important to us. Maybe I'm recounting the exciting moment at Mateo's soccer game the night before. I don't have to script that out, right? I can just tell you the story. And if I tell it to you today and somebody else tomorrow and somebody else the next day, it'll be similar, but it's not going to be word for word, right? But just so the practice and the prep is, tell the Mateo story because it reinforces the point you want to make, but don't script it out. And your mood and your energy will just be matched with what's natural, right?
And I've had a couple of executives that I think have helped me over time, where a lot of times they'll say, if you could, one of the preps we do for meetings is, because sometimes that you may plan to be speaking for 15 minutes, but at the end of the day, you only have 1 minute. And the question I always ask is, if there are only 3 points that you can land, or 3 key things that you can do, what are those 3 things? So you're taking that, like, here's my 15-minute version, here's my 5-minute version, here's my 3-minute version, and here's my 1-minute version, and really sort of distilling it down. I remember also one executive that used to sit in the back of the room as we were preparing for big pitches. And she used to yell as you put your slide up, because, a lot of times people will put a slide up and then they'll speak right to the slide, or they'll say, I'm not going to drain the slide. She would bellow from the back of the room, so what? And the point, I remember at the time being like, God, I can't believe she's doing this. This was for the prep, but it was a really good forcing function, because what she was conveying was, don't worry about the slide. Like, what are the most important things that you're trying to convey? This is just a backdrop to the conversation you're having. Really distill it down to be crisp and to the point.
I love that. I do remember that leader too. She was great. And, there's always 3 things. I'm going to do some research on this because there has to be some brain science around it. So I want to learn that. But that always works for me, right? 3 things. There's always 3 things. And 3 things are easy to remember. They're, I think, easy for other people to remember. But I do know what you mean. Like, sometimes when you see a leader who's done like phenomenal prep and someone says to them, okay, well, you were supposed to have 15 minutes, but you only have 3, go. And they struggle, right? It's exactly what you're talking about. I also want to talk about creating effective teams. So I had an opportunity to review your LinkedIn profile, and it said, creates a positive working environment where people grow, collaborate, and succeed. And I smiled when I read it because I'm like, yep, sounds like Michael. It's what I experienced with you, right? Can you talk a little bit about the leadership principles behind that? What do you actually do? How are you creating that positive work environment, which is so important these days?
I've had so many great mentors over the years, and so sometimes I'll even forget which one sort of gave me some of these great nuggets of advice. There's a guy named Bruce Lehman, who was an executive coach of mine at one point, gave me some amazing advice. There's a woman that worked for me named Diane Layton, who gave me some of the best advice in my career. And, I think part of it is, at one point, someone gave me really great advice that says, in the beginning of so at a lot of companies, what you do is at the end of a year, you then write up sort of your annual reviews. And your annual review is like, this is what I accomplished this year. And someone at one point encouraged me to sort of flip it on its end. And they said, I want you to start every single year writing your full year review. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? And they go, look, you're not going to know that whether you were 125% of plan or 150% of plan. But what you should know is, what are we going to achieve? how are we going to grow, and what are we going to be known for? And that can be a personal thing, but that can also be a team mission statement. And so every single year, I sort of would write those things down in the beginning of the year. And what I really loved about it was, like, for me personally, it's sort of this idea of like I'm a lifelong learner. Where I get my energy from is if I feel like I'm growing overall skill sets. And so if I could have a vision of like what we were going to achieve, how we were going to grow, and what we were going to be known for, I mean, that's like, I would, at that point, it was like I was in the zone. And if I could get people inspired by that, I think that got the organization in the zone. So it started off almost like a New Year's resolution where it was very personal to me and my overall development. Then I started to evolve it to say, I'm going to share this with the team. And then there are points and times where I've actually shared it with customers. And so that to me is sort of foundational to, foundational to some of the work I've done. And so on what you want to be known for, if you looked at my LinkedIn profile, and I don't have it in front of me, but it's something like, passionate, focused, and empowering leader who delivers strong results and builds a pipeline of future leaders that are inspired by the change they could drive. It's sort of, and the leader at the time said, why don't you be more purposeful about what you want to be known for? And so it's almost like you're writing a brand statement for yourself. And let me tell you, if you write a brand statement for yourself and you're actually not being true to that brand, it's like, so one of the contracts I had with people, like you have a board of advisor, folks that are very close to you, is I wrote that brand statement. I felt very reluctant about putting it out. But what I did is I sort of put it out there. And what I said to folks is I go, one, does this resonate with you, given the body of work that we've done together in the past? And they help sort of shape aspects of it, because sometimes you may not be aware of sort of what it is that your superpowers or what it is that you're known for. And then two, what I said is I'm going to give you permission that if I ever have a meeting where I'm actually being inauthentic against that brand statement, I want you to tell me. And the Diane Layton, who worked for me, who's my chief of staff, sort of said, we would wrap a meeting and she would say to me, like, you really blew it. Like, you talk about X, Y, and Z, and let me tell you how you operate it in the moment. But it was a great way to be very clear about, this is what I want to be known for. This is how I want to be able to operate. And this is my North Star. And so in those moments of tense situations or whatever, could you always sort of reflect back on that and say, was I true to sort of what I want to be known for? So hopefully that's helpful on that side.
There's so many things that are helpful. First of all, I think we all as leaders think we're self-aware, and we may be, right? But there's always a gap, or there's usually a gap, or there can be a gap. And you just made me think of something that happened to me. So I remember I was like leading this big team. I thought everything was going great. It was like my team liked me. I could tell my reviews were all really good. My sort of 360 feedback. And one day I was with my leadership team and I was like, I feel so bad. There was somebody on the team and we were talking. And then at the end, she's like, wow, you're not scary. Everybody thinks you're scary. And I was like, can you believe I said this to my leadership, can you believe she said that I'm scary? I'm not scary. And like 4 eyes like looked up. They're like, well, sometimes you can be a little scary. I'm like, really? Me? Like nerdy me? Like, I'm not scary. Anyway, so I think having that feedback loop is really important. And I love Diane Layton. Thanks for reminding me about her amazing leadership. But I think the other thing that it pulls out for me is that you create an environment, you surround yourself with really good people, but you're also inviting the feedback, right? Because I've observed leaders where bad news does not travel fast, and it is one of the most destructive things in an organization, I think. And to create an environment where you're soliciting feedback, personal feedback about yourself, which I think is even harder, so that really close people around you will actually tell you, her saying, you blew it. I don't think it's something that leaders can take for granted, right? You create that condition. Any thoughts on how you create that condition so that bad news travels faster? I'm
sort of a learner, so sometimes it's through practical experience, sometimes it's through books. There's a great book called Good to Great by Jim Collins, and he talks about this concept of level 5 leadership. And one of the things that sort of stuck with me over time was he has this analogy called the mirror in the window. And the notion goes something like this: is like level 5 leaders, which are like off the charts leaders, do the mirror in the window really well. Like when things go epically bad, the first thing that they do is they look in the mirror and reflect on how they contributed to sort of this mishap or setback or whatever it is, and they own it. So they very clearly articulate the things that they did that contributed to the overall situation. And then the window is when things go amazingly well, the first thing they do is they look out the window and they make sure that they're shining the light or sending praise to folks that contributed to that overall success. And in my mind, when you, a lot of times when you practice that, it's what'll end up happening is it gives people permission to realize like making mistakes isn't fatal. You know what I mean? But what we expect is for people to take ownership of it. And so I think some of it is, as a leader, I just encourage people to be, like you have to think about, let me be vulnerable. Like, let me be vulnerable about the things that I'm maybe not, the mistakes I made or things along those lines, because we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for progress. And what we're looking for is just a, relentless sort of commitment to sort of grow. And so that for me is always stuck with me. And in the worst moments, I always sort of say, okay, mirror in the window. Am I actually taking the right accountability and setting the tone? And then how are we going to lead the organization through this? I think that has been impactful for me and stuck with me over the years.
Well, I've read Good to Great a long time ago, but you're reminding me to go back. Mirror and the window. I think that's a phenomenal, kind of mental picture. And just, you are also talking about, you're basically modeling the way. It's one thing to say mistakes are fine in this organization, but unless people see you saying, hey guys, you know what? I made this mistake today. This is what I'm going to do better next time. If they see you doing that, they're more apt to do that too.
And you have to think about this is another one that I stole from somebody, I can't remember who. Plagiarism is highly encouraged with the right attribution. I think this might have been like a Jordan Christophidis or Phil Sorgen one, but there was this, we reserve the right to be smarter. Like at the end of the day, I think at any given time, like we set a direction and we set a course, but we always reserve the right to be smarter because we operate in an industry that changes so quickly. And so that's very liberating when you sort of think about that. And I think that's an important aspect of it.
I love that you said that because I feel the same way. When I was introduced to growth mindset, which I basically bubble down to, if I really am practicing growth mindset, I am never as good today as I will be next week, next year, in 10 years. And if you can somehow walk in the confidence of, I'm pretty good at what I do. I've been doing this a while. So I might say, I'm pretty good at this podcasting thing. I just started, 9 weeks ago. But I'm not as good as I'll be next year. In fact, I should probably have you back next year. It'll be a much better interview. It is liberating because you can just say, yeah, of course, I learned something. I can get better versus, feeling like it's a test every single time.
What's the thing is it's, I'm not great at it yet. Like the word yet was the big, and I love that about it because it sort of demonstrated sort of a commitment for improvement and sort of on that side. So that growth mindset stuff is super, super powerful.
So what about leading through change? Because I feel like in the tech industry, change is sort of a constant. So you have to get good. But I also reflect back to the time we worked together, as I mentioned, so much change. And if you don't mind me saying, last week we had an opportunity just to connect briefly for the first time in a while. And we were just reminiscing a little bit and we were talking about that really high change. And I reported to you and you were like, oh my gosh, do you remember all these things were going on? And I sat back and I'm like, well, I remember it was hard, but I don't remember it the way you do. And I'm like, Michael must have been shielding us from a lot, right? Like that, because I think there was a lot going on that you shared with me post that just wasn't there. And so I guess I would love just your thoughts around, leading through change. I mean, one thing I observed was just you shielding your team. I'm assuming based on that conversation last week, but any thoughts about?
Yeah, look, there's a fine line between what I'll call shielding and what I'll also just call, I can't think of a great way to say it, but I'll say it this way, which is sometimes, clarity is so important. Like if you kind of like this notion of no matter how crazy things are, if you kind of are always grounded on like, here are our North Stars as an organization, and these are the things that are most important every single day that we wake up and how we get after it, that has a calming influence on the overall organization. And so sometimes that's, we can be in meetings where we feel like we're being whipsawed about. And I think the great leaders are the ones that sort of get whipsawed in the moment, but then process like all these things that are happening that are going to feel like fire drills or turns to the left or turns to the right. How can I connect them back to strategy so that people feel grounded that, hey, our North Star priorities are the same. We're reserving the right to be smarter. And here are some of the executional changes that we're making. But let me tie it back to our North Star priorities. And this is how it relates to the company's mission. So there's this notion of, when you're in the storm, how do you also make sure that you're connecting it back to something that feels like clarity and focus for the org? So, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, look, leading through change, I think, is literally one of the most important skill sets as a leader. And remember how it a lot of times goes. You find out about the change first. You sort of go through like, the 7 stages of grief or whatever it is as you're processing this. And then you landed on you've then sort of reconciled yourself to it. Then you landed on your team and they go through the 7 stages. You're like, why are they going through the 7 stages? You're kind of like, duh, think back to 90 days ago. But I think in my time, like again, back to framework and 3 things is sort of the idea of like, whenever we lead change, what I normally see is everybody is very clear on what is changing. Like we all get high marks for that. We're 80% of the time, we're pretty good about why are we making those changes, like giving leadership context associated with it. The one that I see people miss a lot is how are those changes going to make us successful? And when you can do all 3 as a leader, like what is changing, why are we making those changes, and how are these changes going to make us successful? Like that's when you get people like, you really help them accelerate through that change and get them fully engaged against the overall cause. I think that that's been one that has taken me a while to get my head wrapped around. But whenever I'm listening to things, I always make sure that are we really thinking through all 3 of these? Because I know for a fact when we do, we come out stronger on the other end.
I love these frameworks. I think these are going to be so helpful for our listeners. Is the how, because I get the what, I get the why. Is the how, is that like an exciting future vision?
Yeah, you nailed it so well. Like I want people to visualize what will be different. So like you can relate it to this is how we're operating today, or this is what the customer experiences today. This is what future state looks like. So the more you can sort of tell it in a way that they can actually see it and feel it, super, super powerful on that side.
Okay. I really like that. And if you don't mind, the only thing I will add to that is, this is going to sound horrible. I don't mean people are selfish. I just mean, especially when people are feeling like, I don't know if I want to change, if you can make it relevant to them, like this is how your world is going to be so much better. And then of course, and our customers' world and everything else.
No, I think you've actually nailed a really important part of it. And then, is, what is it? What's in it for me? Or how do you have to personalize it. So, because everybody's going to have their own journey, and anytime there's change that, people will immediately sort of process that change. And so I think that's a really important piece. I think when you talk about how is this going to make us successful, you have to think about how is this going to make us successful as an organization, is how is this going to make you successful as an individual looking to, grow a career and be a great professional in the organization that they work with.
I wonder, I had this really big inflection point in my career where I was leading through a major change, and it was just it was in the Dynamics business, and I had no idea how we were going to get there. All I knew is that we had to do it. We had to shift to cloud really, really fast, right? And so I didn't know how we were going to do it, but all I did was focus on that exciting vision, that how we're going to get there, and let go of having to script out exactly the how, right? Like these are the steps. And what I noticed was my amazing team figured all that part out. Like if you can and not only did they figure it out, they figured it out 10 times better than I could have ever expected, right? So there is some magic in if you can create the conditions the people in your team, when you do all the right things, the hiring, the really intellectually curious, all the things you laid out earlier, they step up and deliver and they're excited to. And you're just like, wow, I don't think I could have done all of that. I wasn't the expert, but.
I kind of love that I think it's, I'll relate it that, my first 10 years in my career in this industry, I should say, is that, I lived in Washington, D.C., and I was an enterprise guy. And if you sort of said, Michael, what do you see yourself doing, 20 years from now? I sort of would be like, I thought at the time, like I was going to be in Washington, D.C., and I was going to be an enterprise guy. That was what I was about. And then there was a bunch of situations that happened. I had a great coach that sort of challenged me, and I ended up stepping way far out of my comfort zone. And I ended up taking a job running a corporate business in the middle of the country in Denver, Colorado. And I remember, and it was a business about sort of scale with and through partners. And I knew nothing about partners. I could barely spell partner. And I remember being so far out of my comfort zone and feeling like, what do you call it? Like, feeling like a fake. You know what I mean? Like I no longer could I lead from what I knew. Imposter syndrome, right? That's a good way to think about it. And someone turned me on to this great book. And I think you and I've read this both. I think his first 100 days, David Watkins. I think the first 90 days. And it's a really long book. I'll just tell you, there one section of the book that changed my life as a leader. And it's that notion of like the headline story is you don't need to have all the answers. Sometimes asking the right questions is just as powerful as having the answers, or even more powerful, I should say. And they had this framework, and it was really about learning what kind of business you're in. But it had 5 questions. And as I took on new teams, I took on multiple teams over multiple times. I have used these 5 questions in every single job that I've had. And the 5 questions are super powerful, but it's, the first question is, what are our most promising untapped opportunities? Question number 2, what do we need to do to take advantage of those opportunities? Question 3, what are our biggest challenges? Question 4, why are we facing those challenges as a team? And then question 5, and this is the money one that I love, is if you were me and you were focused on helping this organization and this team reach its full potential, what would you focus on? And so imagine you're meeting with your new leader, or imagine you're meeting with your new team, and you create this simple framework, which essentially is, one, you're giving space to get great insights from your team. And so that you can have sort of great dialogues and you can really inform smart opinions over the 90-day period. There's a whole different process of once you get all those learnings, what you have to do with it over a 90-day period and how you play it back to the team. But for me, that was sort of an eye-opening thing, which is there are times and places where I can just clearly outline the problem statement, clearly outline the principles of how we actually need to execute against that, where I can know full well that I don't have the answers, but I can tap into the collective horsepower of the team to be able to chart that course. That one changed me forever. I love that book.
Well, you told me about that book and I started using it, and the secondary benefit. So all the things that you talked about were great. You actually get this treasure trove of information that you can kind of parse out. The secondary benefit is you get to know your team really well. Who seems really dialed in? Who seems checked out? Who seems really thoughtful in their responses? Who's kind of baseline? You just get a lot.
The altitude of the response was fascinating. Because you could do it with 50 people and you would get such different altitudes, and you were quickly able to realize this is what I think this person's superpower is, and this is how we're going to get them activated across the business. But that's, I think, is a super powerful one. And maybe one more thing to sort of tease out on this one. I'm going to give another frameworky thing, is because I've been a student, and I've been a student to say we've all worked with amazing leaders, and you try to sort of pack together what is it about these leaders that make them amazing? And so I have a theory. And so when in my definition of a great leader is Great leaders get their teams to achieve more than they ever thought was possible. Like that's one definition. And to me, when I think about what they do really, really well, is there's sort of three attributes that I think we need to think about as a leader. One is model the way, the second is coach, and the third is empower. And being really situationally aware of when to actually use each of those leadership modes, I think is super, super important. And what I would argue is every single one of us has a default style. And what happens is, what I really challenge you, it's good to understand what your default style is, but it's really good to think about how am I actually exercising all three of those with high impact? Because like if you're a model the way person where you're always out in front, you're rolling up your sleeves, you're the person that's making that breakthrough with the CEO, could be super impactful for the team. But if you're doing that, how are you helping the next set of leaders grow and reach their full potential? If all you do is sort of coach, inevitably someone's going to ask, like, it's great that they're giving me this coaching, but I also want to know if this person can do. Like, I want to see this person really stretch and get out there, because if a leader can stretch and show that whether it's learning a new skill set, doing a new pitch, whatever it is, then say, gosh, if my leader can do it, I can do it. And so just another frameworky thing that I think has been sort of a powerful thing for me over time is how do you really, I kind of do this, Jamie. If I'm in a situation, I listen for, someone raises a question or something does something, I sort of count to three in my brain. And I said, is this a time and a place where I need to model the way? Is this a time and place I need to coach, or do I need to empower? And being super purposeful about it, that's been another thing that I've used over time.
Wow. Okay. So those three things are amazing: model, coach, empower. But what you said about the balance of those is even more powerful the way I'm hearing it. That plus what you were talking about around the first 90 days. I think we have some early in career listeners, mid-career, and senior leaders, right? And the one thing that I will say that I learned, like as I was going through my coaching practice, is when you're early in career to mid-level, all of the success you have, or a lot of the success, comes because of your expertise, right? If you really think about it, your craft, you're really good at it, and how you demonstrate the thing. As you move into leadership and senior leadership, listen to how you described what a great leader does, like that they help people do more than what's possible. You said model, coach, empower. Maybe model has a little bit of that expertise in there, but it's so much less than that. And seeing leaders transition from all of the feedback coming from my expertise to now having to get confidence and sort of affirmation from these other attributes, right? Creating clarity and getting the best out of people, synthesizing information. That is a leadership step that everybody needs to go through and transition. And maybe just some of our early in career and mid-career leaders, just even having that framework that you talked about will help them make that leap.
Yeah, look, in many ways, what I'll tell you is someone had to call me out on it for me to sort of register and get that learning. And so I'll tell I remember my first manager job. Like I had a job that spanned all the way to Philadelphia down to Richmond, Virginia. And I remember like planning out the 5 days of the week. Like I'm going to be in this market on Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to be this market on Friday and whatever it was. And I remember like 5 weeks in a row going down to Richmond, Virginia and Southern Virginia. And I'm somewhere like in the middle of like Roanoke, and I'm with Jerry Breslin. I remember his name very specifically. And Jerry pulled over to the side of the road. We're like in the middle of nowhere. And he's like, boss man, I love that you're coming down here every week, but when are you going to let me do my job? And just like hit me with the 2x4. And it was such a gift that he gave me at the time. And the lesson from it was like every time that you step into a new sort of set of responsibilities, you have to redefine what success looks like. And you have to, it was no longer about what I could do. And I thought I was just removing friction for the team, helping to get the deal done. But I have to realize like now part of the way I measure my success is sort of, how I'm able to get people reach their full potential as professionals, how I could get more work done from the collective whole. Like you just have to redefine it. And so, that lesson I will always remember. And so, and one of the first, whenever I talk to people that get new jobs is actually when I took that big job from DC to Denver, Matt Pease was my boss at the time. I'm going to give all these people calls because I forgot. I miss a lot of these people. And Matt says, very few times in your career do you get to reinvent yourself. And so I want you to think about the things that you know you do well, and I want you to think about where you want to grow and how are you going to use this opportunity to really be able to, play to your strengths, but also really lean into the growth opportunities. I remember that just sort of stuck with me. But anytime you're taking a new step, my advice to you is redefine how you measure success. Critical step in the overall process to get in the right mindset.
Excellent. Well, that's what this podcast is really all about. It's like I should have been an engineer, I think, because I see all these outcomes of great leaders, and I want to reverse engineer them and saying, but specifically, how do you do that? And the frameworks you've given us today are amazing. And the only thing I would add to your story is I would love the leaders on this call to reflect, are you the type of leader, like Michael is, that a Jerry Breslin would say that to you, would say, hey, boss, when are you going to let me do my job? Because if Jerry hadn't said that to you, who knows how long those behaviors would have persisted and would you have grown? So that's just an interesting reflection. Would my Jerry have told me that? So
yeah, I think that's a good one. I like that. So
well, I'm about to move into my final question that I ask everybody. But before I do, I just want to see if there's anything else that you wanted to add. I could be here all day with you, but I have to respect your time.
Nothing top of mind for me right now. You've obviously, I think I've given all my secret 3-formula frameworks or 3-point frameworks. So.
Well, I might embarrass you a little bit by saying this, but I've been thinking a lot about you. So you've been almost 30 years in tech, 2 iconic companies, 20 years at Microsoft, 6 or 7 at Google. You led a $3 billion business at Microsoft. Now you lead all of Google North America. And Michael, you're still the same person. You're like Michael 4.0 to me from when I first met you, but you're still the same person. And I'll tell a quick story. I met you because I was 24 years old. I got my first job at Microsoft. I had no idea what I was doing as a sales rep. And I was hired onto this medium business team, which at the time was actually the most exciting place to be, but nobody really saw it that way. That was where the junior people went. You were in enterprise, which was like the big, bold enterprise. And I was just like this young person, no idea what I was doing. And I would knock on people's doors like the enterprise reps and ask for help. And most of them shooed me away. They're like, yeah, I don't know. I don't have time for you. But not you. You were always super busy and very intentional and such a hard worker. But whenever I came to you, you always had time for me. You always listened. You were always helpful. And there's something about you that I'm hearing in your leadership, the focus on others that is still there all these years later. So you've put a lot of tools in your tool belt. But I think I don't even know why I'm telling this. I think I'm telling the story because focusing on people and caring about people, even when there is nothing you think that they can do for you, really, really matters, and that's a core component of your leadership, I think, that shows up.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe the thing I would draw out from that is, it's amazing because I remember very fondly those days, sort of in the late 90s, sort of turn of the century, in that part of my, sort of my career. And what's amazing after sort of having now done this for, sort of 30 years is that, take every, like what'll end up happening is, so many of the people that I was surrounded with, including yourself, have gone on to do amazing things in the industry. Like I remember at the time and the place that when I first joined Microsoft, like I wore glasses because I just was trying to look older. Now I wear glasses because I can't read a single thing without them. But it was sort of one of those things that, really embrace the time and opportunity to get to know your peers, because what'll end up happening is this cohort of folks that you're working with today, before you know it, when you wake up, you'll look left to right. And they're doing amazing things in the overall industry. And that can be just so rewarding on that side.
That's right. And, you just never know. Just the little bit of encouragement goes a long way for people in your organization. So thank you for that. All right. So I ask every guest the last question, and that is, if you could wrap by giving us just one piece of advice about leadership, what would that be?
Oh, God, that is such a good one. One piece of advice, about leadership. I don't know why this is coming to mind, but I'll just sort of say it, which is for me, it's just this, the number one thing that I think about every single day is this sort of like what is sort of this idea of get after it. And what I mean by that is like, you know, every opportunity that you have to stretch and grow, take full advantage of it and create forcing functions to be able to do it. So think about it in your own personal life. You know, for me, I remember, you know, barely being able to run a mile to being able to do a marathon. And part of the process for me was just telling someone, I'm signing up for this marathon and I'm going to do it, which was the forcing function. And then being very purposeful about the training plan that's associated with it. It's no different in the professional world. And so really, like, as you think about it, try to say, like, on an ongoing basis, every single day, every single week, every single month, every single quarter, what are you doing to get after it? And get after it specifically to me means, what are you doing to get outside your comfort zone, stretch yourself, and be able to learn new skill sets? If you can do that really well over a sustained period of time, there's no question in my mind that you'll continue to go great places. Because I think that that's where that level of constantly stretching and constantly growing is arguably the most important thing for growth on an ongoing basis. That would be my advice.
That is like the best advice in the world. And I think you somehow encapsulated all of your success in that one statement. Get after it. That's great, Michael. Thank you so much for being here today. I can't wait for our listeners to hear this episode, and I would love for them to put some comments in and let us know what you think. But thank you for spending your time with us. What a gift. Thank you.
Hey, Jamie, it's been awesome to reconnect. It's always knew you were going to do amazing things. And so thrilled to have this conversation and look forward to talking soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Michael. Take care. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Join us every Tuesday for insider access to executive leadership.